One of China's most powerful policemen is sentenced to 15 years in prison over a scandal that shocked the ruling Communist Party. Just what does it mean for the party as it's about to begin its leadership transition? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme with me, David Foster. The former police chief at the centre of China's biggest political scandal in recent memory, Wang Lijun, has been sentenced to 15 years in jail. From violent death to gang wars, from bribery to political intrigue at the very top. The events surrounding the case have shaken the Chinese leadership and seen the wife of an influential communist politician convicted of murder. Marga Ortigas has more.
Putting it all behind, that's what Chinese authorities hope to have accomplished by finally convicting Wang Lijun, a former regional police chief who had long been portrayed a hero and was once known as the pride of the force.
The
court of Sichuan province jails Wang Lijun for 7 years in prison on the charge of bending the law for selfish ends, 2 years in prison on the charge of defection while depriving his political rights for a year, and gives 2 more years for abuse of power and 9 years for bribe-taking.
This is seen as a relatively lenient sentence for the controversial Wang. All this was brought about by his involvement in the cover-up of a British businessman's murder earlier in the year. The woman suspected and ultimately convicted of that murder was no other than the wife of Wang's boss and longtime ally, Bo Xilai, the powerful regional party chief who, until Wang's allegations, was seen as a rising star in the ruling party's hierarchy. Bo was expected to take a top post in the leadership transition taking place by the end of the year.
The corruption, the party infighting, and the glimpses into a frowned-upon privileged lifestyle that Wang's actions revealed were nothing new as far as many in China were concerned. It had been whispered about and suspected for quite a while. But Wang involved outsiders. This opened the lid to public scrutiny and forced the ruling party to have to save face and react just as publicly.
China's ruling party is transitioning to a new generation of leaders by the end of the year, and with social unrest already growing due to a widening wealth gap, the last thing the party needed was a political scandal that further undermined its systems.
The stability of the party is paramount, and no individual, no matter how able and what is his track record or what is his connections, would be allowed to threaten the party vote, because there's no good for anybody, no matter what his or her affiliations are.
Chinese authorities hope Wang's sentence is enough to show that no one is above the law. It could have been much harsher, but prosecutors appealed for leniency because of Wang's meritorious service and cooperation in possibly bringing down other, more powerful players. The next one on the list being the disgraced Bo Xilai.
Let's take a look at the scandal in a bit more detail. It began in March when Bo Xilai was removed from power. Soon after that, it emerges that there could be links between Bo and the death of the British businessman Neil Heywood. On April the 10th, Bo is suspended from his position and his wife Gu Kai-lai is investigated in connection with Mr Heywood's death. Nearly 4 months later, Gu and a family employee are charged with the killing of Heywood. And in August, Gu goes on trial for murder, a case that lasts just 1 day. On the 20th of August, Gu's found guilty and given a suspended death sentence. In September, Chongqing Police Chief Wang Lijun is charged with defection, abuse of power and taking bribes. And on Monday, he was sentenced to 15 years in jail. So how would the Communist Party of China manage the consequences of this scandal? Our guests are from Beijing. Willem Van Kemenade, political analyst and author of several books on China's foreign relations. From Hong Kong, Frank Ching, political commentator and lecturer at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And joining us via broadband, Jamil Anderlini, Financial Times Beijing bureau chief, who has just authored a book called The Bo Xilai Scandal, Power, Death and Politics in China. Warm welcome to all three of you onto this edition of Inside Story. Willem Van Kemenade, first of all, why does this case seem to have destabilised the Chinese political psyche so much?
Well, Bo Xilai is one of the most charismatic leaders. He was one of the top 25 in the Politburo and was tipped to join the standing committee of the Politburo, to be reduced in membership from 9 to 7 during the upcoming party congress. And he had built up an alternative constituency in his base in Chongqing, a mega city of 30 million, where he had formulated a kind of neo-Maoist renaissance consisting of reviving the heroism of Maoist song festivals, large programs of low-class affordable housing for the masses, and he was formulating an alternative policy that was populist and had a direct appeal to the people, in contrast to the rather dour and uncharismatic two top leaders, President Hu Jintao and Premier Wen Jiabao.
Jamil Anderlini in Beijing, the book that I mentioned that has come out in the last 24 hours called The Beaujolais Scandal. In the write-up for it, it says you will give the first global revelations around the country's powerful princelings. Now, who are these princelings?
Well, in the Chinese context, a princeling is the son or daughter of a senior official. There are different generations of princelings, from the really red princelings from the early days, the children of the very first generation of powerful leaders, and Bo Xilai was one of them. He's about 62, 63 years old, and he was the son of one of the founding fathers of the Chinese modern People's Republic of China. But he has a son who's in the third generation, studied at Oxford, and is currently just graduated from Harvard.
And can I just butt in a second there to suggest that the prospective new leader of China, Xi Jinping, is also described by some people as one of these princelings. Massive rivalry, perhaps, between him and Bo Xilai.
Certainly, Xi Jinping is also a princeling. There's a whole class of these people, and they are playing an increasing role in Chinese politics. By some accounts, we don't really know, but by some accounts, there was a strong rivalry between Bo Xilai and Xi Jinping. Bo Xilai actually looked down on Xi Jinping and thought he was kind of a nobody compared to him. He had a more powerful father back in the day, and he believed in the bloodline theory that at some point in his life, at least, that where if your father was a revolutionary, you're a revolutionary. If your father ruled the nation, then you should rule the nation. And so, yeah, there's a bit of hereditary, the right to rule theory coming in here in China.
Frank Ching, what does this say about the suggestion that China was a communist state where people were given equal opportunities, when you have people at the top vying for power, enormous wealth in many cases, bribery, corruption, gang wars? How do the people fit into this? Do they feel very alienated?
Well, I think that very few people believe that China is a communist state anymore. I think that people do feel alienated. The recent protests against Japan that took place all across China, I thought it was very, very interesting that a lot of the protesters carried pictures of Chairman Mao, who of course died in 1976. And it seems to me that they are using Chairman Mao to criticize the current leaders, saying that they are not as good as the first generation of Chinese leaders. So I think that there's a lot of dissatisfaction within China today between the haves and the have-nots, and also between the people who are in power and the people who are out of power and who want to be in power. And I think that Bo Xilai was very much a controversial figure in China. Xi Jinping did go to Chongqing. Chongqing, of course, was Bo Xilai's city. But the two top leaders, President Hu Jintao and Prime Minister Wen Jiabao, never went to Chongqing. That is, they never went to pay their respects, as it were, to Bo Xilai. And there, I think, is an indication that they disapproved of what he was doing there.
Let me ask you, Willem, in Beijing, Mr. Wang, the policeman, went to the US consulate. There was a suggestion he was looking to defect. He told his story there, and then he left, it appears, of his own accord, and this then led to the suspension of Bo Xilai. Why do you think he walked out into the arms of the authorities, and why do you think, maybe I'm imagining this, that when he was sentenced to 15 years today, he didn't look that unhappy?
No. Well, he didn't walk out of his own free will. The Americans considered all the pros and cons of the case and refused to give him political asylum. The Obama administration didn't seriously consider it because if you look at the record of the guy, you know, he has a history of a large variety of vicious crimes. He was a pioneer in the sale of organs of sentenced to death prisoners. He did all kinds of medical experiments with prisoners, and he was the top force behind the so-called Smash Black campaign in Chongqing, a campaign allegedly against organized crime, but against any circle that was critical of Bo Xilai. And so thousands of people were imprisoned, and 13 of them were executed, and many fled abroad. And Wang Lijun was the architect of all this.
And let me go to Jamil Anderlini. A 6 million yuan bounty put on Wang's head, it was suggested, which is what, about $1 million by people he'd upset, criminal bosses, senior police officers. He's made a lot of enemies away from the state apparatus. So who do you believe is most behind trying to bring about the downfall of Bo Xilai?
I think probably if you look back, and my book goes through this, you look back at Bo Xilai's career, he really alienated most people that he worked with. He was extremely charming. He was extremely, good in front of the camera. He charmed the foreigners. He charmed foreign business people, foreign media. I met him a few times, and he was always very charming to me, remembered by name, which no Chinese official would ever be able to remember the name of a foreign journalist. He was extremely charming, but with the people he worked with, by all accounts, we've interviewed, lots and lots of people, more than a dozen people who worked with him. They hated him. He worked terrible hours. He would call them in the middle of the night and force them to come to meetings at the drop of a hat. He yelled at people. He ruined their careers, and he was very vindictive. He actually went after some people, planting drugs on some people allegedly, who he fell out with. Most people actually within the power structure in China hated and feared this guy. So he had a lot of enemies. In the end, I think probably what brought him down was really the fact that a lot of people say if Wang Lijun, the police chief, hadn't run away to the American consulate, none of this would have come about, and Bo Xilai would be about to be named in the top echelons of the party into the standing committee of the Politburo.
Well, we will get to where Bo Xilai is at the moment and what might happen to him towards the end of this inside story. But for now, Frank Ching, there you have Bo Xilai causing so much confusion in and around Chinese central government, also among those people in his province. And we have the transition. Once every 10 years, the leadership is handed over, and it's expected to go to Xi Jinping very soon, a man who disappeared for about 3 or 4 weeks when all of this was supposed to be aiming at his natural succession, the party meeting when he would be anointed. Now he's reappeared and the succession has been put back. Is that all to do with this?
Well, he disappeared for 13 days. And the story that was first put out when he disappeared was that he had a back problem. And a couple of days ago, a vice chairman of the CPPCC, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, C.H. Tong, who used to be chief executive in Hong Kong, was on CNN, and he confirmed that she had hurt his back while swimming. So I accept that. But why wouldn't they announce this? Well, I think in China, the health of a leader is considered to be a state secret. I think this ought to change fairly soon, because you cannot keep the whole world guessing about the welfare of the leader of 1.3 billion people.
But does it suggest the fact that the anointing of Xi has been put back for some time, that there are serious arguments within the higher echelons of the Communist Party about the direction China might take under his leadership?
Well, it does appear that the party congress might be put back. The expectation was that it would be held in mid-October, in which case there would have been an announcement sometime in September. And there are only maybe 5 days left in September. So it looks as though the Congress might be moved back to November. And that suggests that there are disagreements as to who the personnel would be, who these 7 people would be in the Standing Committee of the Politburo, and also the direction that the country might take. I certainly am not privy to what is going on behind the scenes, but it seems to me that Xi Jinping is still on track to become the next leader of China, succeeding Hu Jintao as both the leader of the Communist Party this year and as the head of state, the president, in the spring of next year. But apparently not as the commander of the military for another 2 years or so.
Okay, Willem Van Kemenade, in Beijing, the fact that there are these delays for whatever reason, and the suggestions that there are arguments about who should be at the highest level of the Communist Party running China, in effect, does that suggest to you that there are serious misgivings among powerful people about the way China's going to go in the next 10 years?
Yes, there is no general settlement, there is no consensus. One of the factors for the delay is that Bo Xilai, despite his unpopularity among, well, let's say the majority of the establishment, he still has a support base of what is called the far left or the neo-Maoist left. And these people cannot just be brushed aside. Some kind of accommodation of these people has to be made, and this is probably one of the factors that is delaying unity and harmony and the beginning of the Congress. Another factor is Hu Jintao, the current president, he will try the same tack as his predecessors Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin after his resignation as President and General Secretary, to stay on as Chairman of the Military Commission. Hu Jintao wants to do the same. The other leaders are not in a mood for that. The former President Jiang Zemin, who is in his 80s now, is giving support to Xi Jinping to prevent that Hu Jintao tries to cling on to the chairmanship of the Military Commission. That's another factor for delay. So plenty of things to reach a compromise about.
Jamil, how strong are the differences between those parties, perhaps the neo-Maoists and the more liberal people who want to see China as a 21st century, effectively capitalist, communist power? How deep are the differences, and how great are the tensions?
When I talk to people in the party, the general consensus that I hear is that China's at a turning point. China needs new reforms. It needs a new system. It's basically the system that served it quite well until now is basically running out of steam, economically, politically. But there's no consensus on what exactly needs to happen. There's a large group, in my opinion, that really believes democracy, rule of law, a more representative political system is the answer. The problem is they don't know how to get there. From what they have now to that is a long way, and it's very, very difficult to work out what steps you need to do in between. And then, of course, there's a big reactionary group within the party, which believes that the party must hang on at all costs to one-party rule, and there's no other alternative to that. And so you really do. I think the splits are very, very obvious. And I think the Bo Xilai case, although it was partly, you know, it was kind of a random series of events, at least from the outside, I think it's a symptom of these clashes that are going on within the party.
And Bojilai himself, Frank Ching, nobody knows, at least nobody I know has told me whether he might be and what might happen to him next.
That's right. There's been speculation as to whether there will be a trial or whether he will be handled by the party. So far, he's only been accused of violating party discipline. But from what transpired at the trial of his wife and of the former police chief, Wang Lijun, it seems to me that they have laid the groundwork for a criminal trial of Bojilai himself. He seems to have been accused of attempting to cover up his wife's involvement in the murder. And that is a criminal offense. That is not simply a matter of party discipline. So I think it is likely that Bo will be brought to trial.
And would you expect a severe punishment for him?
Yes, I do expect a severe punishment for him. I think the punishment of the former policeman, Wang Lijun, was relatively light. 15 years is very light in view of the grave charges that he faced. Bojilai, I think, will face serious charges and will probably get a prison sentence. He probably will not be given a suspended death sentence like his wife, but I think he will be given a stiff prison sentence.
Willem Van Kemenade, is this perhaps to some extent about sending a message to those that might flex their muscles too powerfully politically that nobody is above the law?
Oh, definitely. As I just said, Maoism stands for populism, for a leftist alternative that fights corruption, that promotes equality, that wants to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor. And, well, Bojilai was willing to go very far. A few months ago, there were accusations that he had even been scheming with some top generals in the southwest of the country to stage a coup d'etat. And, well, I think this didn't happen, and it, in all probability, is not going to happen in the near future.
Jamil Anderlini, we're coming towards the end of this edition of Inside Story. Your book, The Bojilai Scandal, Power, Death and Politics in China. In the course of researching it, were there things that surprised you? I mean, you've been, I believe, in China working as a correspondent for more than 10 years now, but were there things that really jumped out at you and said, I had no idea this was going on?
Well, this is the most incredible political story I've ever covered. Normally in China, covering politics is all about reading the tea leaves and very much, peakingology. It's all, we do it from a great distance. But this was the first real major political scandal in China that happened in real time through the internet. I think we'll look back in history in 10, 20, 50 years, and we'll say this was a moment when the illusion of the Chinese leaders as these clean officials who oversee a relatively corrupt system, but themselves are quite clean. I think we'll see that illusion. We'll see this as the moment that illusion was shattered. Globally and in China, people really now have an insight into corruption, murder, politics, death. At the very highest levels of government, which most people believe the propaganda that was not what happened at the very top of the party, and clearly it does.
An extraordinary tale, and it isn't over yet. Thank you very much indeed to all of my guests on this edition of Inside Story from Beijing. Willem Van Kemenade from Hong Kong, Frank Ching and Jamil Anderlini also from Beijing. Thank you too for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Do send us your thoughts. If you want to use email, the address is insidestory@aljazeera.net. Inside Story at aljazeera.net. From all of the team on Inside Story, from me, David Foster, thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.